The call that broke the silence. The evening was quiet, almost too quiet, when Keanu Reeves sat alone in his home, staring at his phone. The day had been long, filled with press interviews, flashes of cameras, and endless questions that felt more like noise than real connection. He craved silence, but inside his thoughts would not rest. The world saw him as calm and unshakable, yet tonight something in his heart felt unsettled. His phone vibrated, the sound cutting through the stillness. He looked down and saw a name that froze him in place: Alexandra Grant. It had been weeks since they last spoke. Their friendship, their bond, had been tested by distance, by misunderstandings, by the demands of two lives running in different directions. And now here she was, calling when he least expected it. His thumb hovered over the screen for a moment, fear and hope colliding. He answered softly, his voice careful. "Alexandra." On the other end, her breath trembled. "Keanu, I didn't know if I should call, but I had to. Something happened." The tone of her voice sent a chill through him. He leaned forward, his heart tightening. "Tell me," he said, his words firm but gentle. For a moment there was silence. Then she whispered, "I've been carrying something heavy, and I can't hold it alone anymore." Her words cracked as though each one cost her strength. Keanu closed his eyes, the weight of her pain sinking into him. He remembered all the times she had been his anchor, the way her wisdom and kindness guided him when the world felt overwhelming. Hearing her this fragile shook him in a way he couldn't hide. "Where are you?" he asked quickly. "I can come." "No," she said, her voice breaking. "Not yet. I just needed you to hear me first. I needed you to know that I'm not okay." His chest ached. He wanted to reach through the line to steady her the way she had steadied him countless times. "Alexandra, you're not alone. You don't have to be alone in this. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." She let out a quiet sob, and for a long moment there was only the sound of her breathing. Then, almost in a whisper, she confessed, "Someone I trusted betrayed me. They used my work, my art, for their own gain. I feel like everything I built is crumbling." Keanu felt anger stir in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "Your work is you. No one can steal that. They can take pieces, but they can't take your soul. You're stronger than what they've done." Her silence spoke louder than words. She was listening, but her heart was wounded deeply. Keanu knew this was not a problem that could be solved with comforting lines. This was a fracture that needed time, presence, and resilience. He thought back to the years of their bond, to the quiet dinners, the shared laughter, the way she understood him without words. He knew what he had to do. "Alexandra," he said softly, "stay where you are tonight. Tomorrow I'll come to you. No excuses, no delays. We'll face this storm side by side." Her voice cracked again, but this time it carried a thread of hope. "You mean that?" "I've never meant anything more," he replied. When the call ended, Keanu sat in the silence, his heart heavy yet determined. He knew tomorrow would bring questions, pain, and truths that could change everything, but he also knew this. Sometimes the most shocking calls are not the ones that bring endings, but the ones that begin a new chapter of courage and connection. The night outside was still, but inside Keanu Reeves had already stepped into a storm he could not ignore. The promise of tomorrow. The morning light crept through the curtains of Keanu's home, but he had hardly slept. His mind replayed Alexandra's trembling voice again and again, each word filled with pain he wished he could take away. He had faced loss, betrayal, and silence in his own life, but hearing her so broken left him restless. He knew she had always been strong, someone who carried grace even when the world was unkind. But now that strength was wavering. He brewed a cup of coffee, his hands steady but his heart unsettled. He looked at the empty chair across from him and imagined her sitting there, her gentle smile hiding the storm inside. He whispered quietly to himself, "Today I'll be there. No more waiting." By noon he was on the road. The city passed in blurs of color and sound, but his thoughts stayed focused only on her. When he reached her neighborhood, he noticed how quiet it felt, as if even the air carried the weight of her struggle. Alexandra opened the door slowly when he knocked. Her eyes told the story her words had hidden the night before. Eyes tired from tears. A face that tried to stay composed but carried the cracks of exhaustion. Keanu did not say anything at first. He simply stepped forward and wrapped her in an embrace, one that spoke louder than words. For a moment she let herself break. Her body trembled as she held on to him, the safety of his presence unlocking the tears she had been holding back. When she finally pulled away, she whispered, "I didn't want you to see me like this." Keanu shook his head softly. "This is the you I care about. Not the perfect image the world demands, but the real you. The one who feels, who hurts, who creates. She looked at him, her lips trembling as though she wanted to believe but couldn't fully accept it. She led him inside where her studio was filled with unfinished canvases. Colors that once carried life now looked muted, abandoned. He walked slowly, taking in the silence of her art. "This room feels like you stopped breathing halfway," he said gently. She nodded, her voice heavy. "When they took my work and claimed it as theirs, I felt like they stole my breath too. I thought I was strong enough to fight it, but I'm not." Keanu turned to her, his eyes firm but kind. "Alexandra, strength is not about never falling. It's about rising again. Even when the ground feels like it's pulling you down, you don't have to rise alone." His words lingered in the air, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something stir inside her, a fragile spark that whispered she might not be as lost as she thought. They sat together on the floor of the studio, surrounded by half-finished paintings. Keanu told her stories of his own scars, moments when grief felt like it had stolen everything from him. He did not speak to erase her pain, but to remind her she was not alone in it. As the day faded into evening, Alexandra finally picked up a brush. Her hand trembled, the canvas staring back at her like a challenge. Keanu sat quietly, watching, his presence steady. She dipped the brush into paint, the first stroke shaky but real. It was not about finishing the painting. It was about beginning again. When she finally set the brush down, her shoulders loosened, and her voice broke softly. "I don't know if I can rebuild everything, but maybe I can start here." Keanu smiled faintly. "That's all you need to do. Start." Yet as hope began to flicker back into her world, he knew this was only the surface. Betrayal has roots that dig deep, and soon they would both learn that the storm surrounding her work was larger and more dangerous than either of them imagined. Cracks in the silence. The next few days brought a fragile calm. Alexandra spent more time in her studio, sometimes just sitting in front of the canvas, sometimes painting with slow strokes that carried both pain and release. Keanu stayed close, not as a shadow hovering over her, but as a quiet presence who reminded her that she was not fighting alone. Yet beneath this fragile peace, cracks were forming. The betrayal she had spoken of was deeper than Keanu first understood. It wasn't just someone stealing her work. It was someone she once trusted with her dreams, someone who had walked with her through years of art and creation. She hadn't told him the full truth that night on the phone. She was too afraid of how heavy it would sound if spoken out loud. But one evening, as they shared a quiet meal at her kitchen table, Keanu noticed the way her eyes kept drifting toward the window, as though shadows might be waiting outside. He finally asked, "Alexandra, who betrayed you?" Her fork froze halfway to her lips. Her hands trembled slightly and she set it down. She took a long breath, her voice quiet, almost breaking. "It was my partner in the gallery. Someone I trusted with everything. They sold my work under their name, made deals behind my back, and when I confronted them, they threatened to destroy me." Keanu's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice calm. "You're saying they're still trying to hurt you?" She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Yes, I didn't want to tell you because I know how this looks. It feels bigger than me. It feels like they've taken my voice." Keanu leaned forward, his tone steady, grounding. "No one can take your voice, no one. They can twist your work, they can try to steal credit, but they cannot erase who you are. Alexandra, I've seen your strength. It's still here even when you feel it's gone." His words gave her a small thread of comfort, but inside she carried a fear that wouldn't leave. The betrayal had shaken her so deeply that even with Keanu's presence, the shadows haunted her. That night, when she finally went to bed, Keanu stayed awake on the sofa. His thoughts raced. He knew betrayal. He knew loss. And he knew that facing it required more than words. It required action. He promised himself quietly, "I will not let her fight this alone." But fate has a way of testing promises. The next morning, Alexandra received an envelope slipped under her door. She picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a letter, cruel and cold, warning her to stay silent or risk losing more than her art. She sank into a chair, her body shaking as she read the words aloud to Keanu. "They said if I try to expose them, they'll destroy me. They'll destroy everything I care about." The room grew heavy with silence. Keanu's eyes darkened, his heart burning with anger. But he steadied his voice as he said, "Then they don't know who they're dealing with. They think fear can break you, but we will not let them win." His words struck her heart, but fear still clung to her. She looked at him, her voice trembling. "Keanu, what if they're right? What if I'm not strong enough to fight this? He reached out, his hand firm around hers. Then I'll lend you my strength until you remember your own. For the first time in weeks, she felt the weight in her chest shift. But deep down, both of them knew the road ahead would not be simple. This was no longer just about stolen art. It was about dignity, resilience, and the courage to stand against the ones who profit from silence. As Alexandra closed her eyes, tears sliding down her face, Keanu sat beside her, his resolve hardening. He had faced storms before, but this one was different. This time, he wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for her. The threat in the shadows, the letter stayed on the table all night, its words like poison in the room. Alexandra sat with her arms folded tight across her chest as though holding herself together was the only way to stop from falling apart. Keanu sat across from her watching, waiting. His silence carrying more comfort than noise. He wanted to tear the paper apart, to erase the fear it carried, but he knew destroying it would not erase the danger. In the days that followed, the threats grew stronger. First came another envelope. This one with photographs of her work signed under someone else's name. Then came the phone calls, silent at first, then cruel voices reminding her that speaking out would cost her everything. Alexandra's spirit wavered. The art that once gave her life now felt like a weapon used against her. Keanu stayed close, but even his calm strength was tested. One evening, after another call ended with laughter on the other end, Alexandra collapsed onto the floor of her studio. "I can't fight them," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They're too powerful, Keanu. They'll ruin me." He knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Alexandra, they want you to believe that. Fear is their weapon. But you are not powerless. You are more than the art they stole. You are the soul behind it. They can't take that away." Her tears fell silently, painting her cheeks with sorrow. "But what if I lose everything else? My gallery, my reputation, my name?" Keanu looked into her eyes, his voice steady, his gaze unshakable. "Then you'll still have your truth. And the truth is worth more than their lies. I will stand beside you even if the world turns against us." Those words planted a seed inside her. She didn't feel strong yet, but she felt something. Something she hadn't felt in weeks. The possibility of hope. Still, the fight was not just against fear. The betrayal had spread further than she realized. One evening, as they sat together going through old documents, Keanu uncovered papers that showed the gallery partner had signed contracts in her name without her knowledge. It wasn't just theft of art, it was theft of identity. Alexandra's hands shook as she read the signatures that were not hers. "They've taken everything," she whispered. "They've left me with nothing." Keanu's jaw tightened, his chest rising with slow, controlled anger. "No," he said firmly. "They haven't taken everything. You still have your voice, and now you have me. We'll fight this, not with fear, but with truth, and truth will always last longer than lies." That night, for the first time in weeks, Alexandra slept without waking from nightmares. Keanu stayed awake, watching over her as the city outside moved on unaware. He knew the storm was not over. If anything, it was just beginning. But he also knew this. Storms test the strength of roots, and hers were stronger than she believed. The next morning, Alexandra picked up her brush again. Her hands still trembled, but the canvas welcomed her. She painted not for the gallery, not for the critics, not for the world that had betrayed her, but for herself. And as she worked, Keanu watched quietly, realizing that even in her pain, she was teaching him something too. That resilience is not the absence of fear, but the courage to create while afraid. But as the sun set that day, another call came. This time the voice was sharp and clear. "You've been warned once. If you keep fighting, it won't just be your career on the line, it'll be him too." Alexandra froze, the phone slipping from her hand. Her eyes met Keanu's, filled with fear she could not hide. The betrayal was no longer just hers to carry. It had reached him as well. The danger becomes real. The call changed everything. Until that moment, Alexandra believed the fight was only hers. Her pain, her art, her reputation. But now the voice had crossed a line. They had threatened Keanu. It was no longer just betrayal. It was war. She stared at him in shock, her hands shaking as the phone slipped to the floor. They said if I don't stop, it will be you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Keanu bent down, picking up the phone with calm hands, but his eyes carried a storm. "Then they've already shown how desperate they are," he said softly. "Fear is all they have left. But Alexandra, listen to me. They will not scare me away. Tears streamed down her cheeks. But what if something happens to you because of me? I couldn't live with that. Maybe I should let it go. Maybe I should stay silent. He leaned closer, his voice steady, unshakable. If you stay silent, they win. And if they win, they'll do this to someone else. We can't let them keep taking. And I promise you, I'm not leaving your side. For a moment, silence filled the studio. She wanted to believe his words. But fear pressed heavy on her heart. Keanu, however, had already made his choice. He would not back down. The next day, they visited a lawyer together, carrying the stolen contracts and the letters. Alexandra's hands trembled as she placed the documents on the table, but Keanu sat beside her, his presence giving her strength. The lawyer's face darkened as he read. This isn't just theft, he said. This is fraud. It's criminal. But it won't be easy. They'll fight back. Are you both prepared for that? Alexandra hesitated, her breath uneven. She looked at Keanu and he gave a simple nod. We're prepared, he said firmly. But the fight escalated faster than they expected. One evening, as they returned to her studio, they found the windows shattered, canvases slashed, and paint spilled across the floor like blood. Alexandra gasped, her knees nearly buckling at the sight. They've destroyed everything, she whispered. Keanu stepped inside, his jaw tight, his fists clenched. No, he said quietly. They haven't destroyed you. They can break glass, they can tear canvases, but they can't touch what's inside you. Her tears fell freely, but his words planted themselves deep in her heart. Still, the fear of danger around them grew heavier. Every knock at the door made her jump. Every shadow outside her window felt like a threat. And yet, in the middle of the chaos, something else grew. Their bond deepened. Each night, as they sat among the ruined pieces of her art, they found strength in one another. Alexandra began to realize that Keanu wasn't just fighting for her. He was fighting with her. And that kind of loyalty was something she had thought existed only in stories. But the enemy was watching. One late night, Keanu received a call on his own phone. The same voice, cold and sharp, said, "Walk away, Reeves. This is not your fight. Stay with her and you'll regret it." Keanu listened, his face unreadable. When the call ended, he looked at Alexandra, who was already shaking. "What did they say?" she asked, her voice trembling. He paused, then answered with calm honesty. "They told me to walk away. But I'm not going anywhere." Her tears returned, but this time they were mixed with something else. Admiration, gratitude, and a fragile hope. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. Keanu held her gaze, his voice soft but filled with conviction. "Because I know what it feels like to lose everything, and I won't let you face that alone." His words wrapped around her like a shield. For the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, she could fight this battle and win. But deep inside, she also knew the danger was far from over. If anything, it was about to reach its breaking point. Truth in the light. The night after the attack on Alexandra's studio, the air felt heavy with dread. Broken glass still crunched underfoot and the smell of paint lingered like a wound. Keanu stood by the window, his eyes scanning the street outside. He was calm on the surface, but inside he carried a storm. He knew this had gone too far. Alexandra sat quietly with a blanket over her shoulders. Her body trembled, but her eyes carried something new. Determination. For weeks, fear had ruled her life, but Keanu's words had planted strength inside her. She whispered into the silence. "We can't let them bury the truth anymore." He turned to her, his voice steady. "So then we take it to the light. No more hiding. No more silence." The next morning, they walked together into the lawyer's office with all the evidence. Contracts, letters, photos of the destroyed studio. Everything laid out like pieces of a puzzle. The lawyer nodded slowly. "This is enough to bring them down. But once this begins, it will be public. Are you ready for that?" Alexandra looked at Keanu, then back at the lawyer. Her voice was soft but firm. "I've been living in fear. I'm done with fear. Let the world see the truth." The days that followed were filled with tension. News outlets picked up the story. Whispers turned into headlines. The gallery partner, once seen as a respected figure, now stood under the shadow of investigation. Messages poured in, some supportive, some cruel. Alexandra's heart wavered at times, but every time she faltered, Keanu reminded her with a simple presence that she was not alone. Then came the day of the hearing. Alexandra walked into the hall with her head held high, though her hands trembled at her sides. Keanu walked beside her, not in front, not behind, but right at her side. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but she kept walking, her eyes fixed ahead. Inside, when she spoke, her voice shook at first. She told the story of trust, of betrayal, of nights filled with fear. She held up the letters, the contracts, the proof. Every word was heavy with emotion, but also with truth. And when her voice nearly broke, Keanu's eyes met hers, steady and strong, giving her the courage to continue. By the time she finished, the room was silent. The truth had filled the air, leaving no space for lies. The decision came swiftly. The fraud was exposed, the partner held accountable. Alexandra's name was cleared, her art restored to her. When they left the hall, the sun broke through the clouds, painting the sky with light. Alexandra stopped on the steps outside, her breath catching in her chest. Tears filled her eyes, but they were not the tears of fear or loss. They were tears of relief, of strength rediscovered. She turned to Keanu, her voice trembling but filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." He shook his head gently. "You could have. The strength was always in you. I just reminded you it was there." She smiled through her tears, a smile that carried both pain and healing. "Then thank you for not letting me forget." They stood there together, the noise of reporters behind them, the world buzzing with questions. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was that they had faced the storm and they had not been broken. That night, back in her studio, Alexandra lit a single candle. The broken glass had been cleared, the canvases replaced. She picked up her brush, her hand steady for the first time in months. Keanu sat quietly nearby, watching as the first stroke touched the canvas. It was not just a painting, it was a beginning. And as the colors spread across the canvas, filling the empty space with life, both of them knew that the shocking phone call that had begun in silence had changed everything. It had tested their resilience, their courage, and their bond. And in the end, it had shown them that truth, when carried with kindness and strength, could light even the darkest path.